I'd done nothing. I'm 48 years old now, and I was a couch potato, doing very little and running an advertising business back in South Africa, doing really well and enjoying life, and relatively was active, but then that kind of slid into the couch. And one day I just decided to make a change, and I took a client away, and he said, "Well, join my little swimming squad." And I hadn't done any swimming for many, many years up until that point. And I thought, well, I've always enjoyed the water, so let me get in the pool. And then I managed to do a few lengths before I almost vomited, because I put myself in the fast lane, and then ego kicks in. You try and keep up with the guys who have been there for years, and you've just on number one, session one. And I stuck to it, and that just started an unbelievable process.
So where were you the first time you did one of these ultra marathons? Like, where was it? Was it in like freezing temperatures?
No. So if anyone's been to Cape Town and had a swim in our waters in Camps Bay and Clifton, they're really, really beautiful. I encourage everyone to come, but the water is cold. It is. I'm going to use the metric system, so we'll have to do some conversions into imperial for you. But the water is around about probably 45 degrees Fahrenheit is what you find, and that is quite chilly. So you are exposed to the cold water. If you ever want to get out the swimming pool and into the ocean, I don't wear any wetsuits or any grease or anything like that. It's purely sort of a brief or a Speedo type costume, one cap and goggles. And so I started to be exposed to the cold quite a lot. And there's a small, back in the day, there's a small swimming community that used to do short distances in these conditions. And I sort of joined them and started to be exposed to the cold, and then taking on more. And eventually someone challenged me to do a swim from Robben Island to the beach. Now, Robben Island is where Nelson Mandela spent 18 of his 27 years incarcerated. And the swim from Robben Island to the beach at that stage, it's a 7.5 kilometers. So what's that, about 5 miles?
Wow.
And it's cold water, and it's quite scary water, to put it bluntly.
What coast is that off? What is that island off of?
It is Table Bay, so it's right at the tip of Africa.
Right at the bottom tip.
Right at the bottom tip of Africa, of Cape Town.
That is a sharky place.
That is a sharky place. Yeah. So that we'll get into that, because that's where a lot of the psychology of what I do comes into it. But just in the early days, I was if someone swam from Robben Island to the beach, it made front page headlines. It was a big accomplishment. And I remember looking at these people who are doing it, and every now and then, maybe once a year, someone would do it, and they'd make the headlines, and I'd just be in awe. I mean, who can do that? It's just insane, right. Crazy stuff. And eventually somebody set me the challenge. Well, hey, you're not enjoying your swimming in the swimming pool. Why don't you try set Robben Island as a challenge? And it was absolutely insane for me. But long story short, I ended up giving it a go after training for about 6 months and making it, and then starting to realize a little bit about myself, that what I thought was impossible for me or reserved for better humans was actually well within my grasp. And that set me on quite an interesting journey. So it was one part of the journey. The other part of the journey was I started, through so much exposure to the element of cold, I started to realize just how unbelievably impactful the element of cold is on the human body, but more importantly on the human mind. So we haven't as humans evolved well at all to handle the cold, but we've evolved exceptionally well to avoid it. So if you throw yourself into cold water, your body, and most importantly your mind, implements some highly evolved and very powerful defense mechanisms to make sure you get out of that situation. So you get pain and panic and fear and hyperventilation. All of this kind of happens in your head. And if the water is really cold, you're often denied the ability of rational thought, and it just wants you to get out of that water, because reality is, if you stay in without protection, you're going to die. You're going to cool. The water is going to cool you down to its temperature. That's just science. It's going to happen. And through repeated exposures, I started to realize just how overzealous this unbelievably powerful defense mechanism in my head was, trying to get me out long before I actually needed to. So there is an endpoint. I acknowledge that. There is an impossible. I'm just on a sidebar, I'm the inspirational speaker who's made an international career not saying that anything is possible. I actually say there is an impossible. There is an endpoint. Let's be real. But where your mind tells you the end point is not where it is, and that's kind of the crux of what I preach in a much more entertaining way. And I started to figure all of this out, that that there's a line that your mind wants you to go back to comfort, and that's to keep you alive, which is great for the survival of our species and all of this, but it's way overzealous. And
I'm sure that has to compromise for a major chunk, a large degree of the human brain is probably designed to keep you away from dangerous situations.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that is what we evolved to do, is to stay alive. And that makes complete sense, and it's obviously a very useful defense mechanism to
But it holds us back.
But it holds us back, and it usually, 99% of the time, it happens subconsciously. So it's something that happens at the back of your brain. You hit a uncomfortable situation and you steer towards comfort. That's absolutely normal. Now, when you throw yourself into cold water, what usually happens subconsciously comes bouncing to the front of your brain. And you actually notice it, like, hang on, it wants me out right now. I can't think of anything. So here's an example. That Robben Island swim I spoke about.
Yeah.
I did it the first time. It was my absolute Everest. I've now done it 122 times. So no one in the world has ever done it more than me. So it has become quite a routine. In summer, when I've got more daylight hours, I go out to the island. I'm there by 6 in the morning. I swim maybe two and a bit hours to get to the beach, and I'm in the office before 9 a.m. So it's routine. But I'll tell you that because on each and every single one of those crossings, which is now routine for me, I get negative. There is, at some point, I start to look for reasons why I can get back into that support boat that's alongside me, rather than stay in the water and make it across to the beach. And I started to become fascinated as to why this is. I mean, here's something I know I'm going to make it to the beach, yet my mind is just telling me and looking for every excuse under the sun to get me out. Now, you mentioned sharks. A cold water swimmer, I promise you, sometimes prays for a shark. Just let the support crew see a fin, because then they will pull me out the water, and it won't be my fault I didn't fail because it was a shark. You start to actively look for reasons why you can fail, not why you should stay in and succeed. And once I started to figure all of this out, I started to realize just how applicable it is, what I'm experiencing in the cold water. And as the colder you get, the more brutal it becomes, or more profound it becomes. It is happening in everyday life to every single one of us, especially in the corporate environment. It is absolutely quite profound. And the reason, I reckon, and I'm no scientist, but I figured this out through many swimming expeditions, is that defense mechanism that is designed to keep us safe, the side effect is to keep us safe from running into a fire or running off a cliff, I suppose. The side effect is it's also designed to keep us safe from the emotional pain that comes from failure. Because when we fail, there's a little bit of hurt, there's consequences, humiliation, there's all those things that go with it. So when we see an environment or a decision that we might take, or a step we might take that could advance us, but it could also lead to failure because we don't know what's on the other side of the line, it's not in our lane, we naturally just gravitate back to staying in the lane and delivering nice, steady performance perhaps, but just not excelling and not learning and not growing.